Now, communicating with your supervisor is important, stating the obvious, but it's really important that you keep your supervisor informed about what's going on. Don't have to have the full details of your personal life, but any personal issues that are affecting your work, particularly any absences. If you're going to be away for 2 weeks or going off on field work or whatever, really important to keep your supervisor in the loop. If I were talking to supervisors, I'd also say the same to them. Really important to keep your students in the loop as to when you're in Oxford, when you're away. But we're not talking to supervisors at the moment. I think it's a good idea to communicate with your supervisor any thoughts about supervision, but that takes confidence. If there are things that are really, really bugging you or irritating you, it's a really good idea to find ways to discuss those with your supervisor, because it could well be that it's very easy to change. And it's a good idea to share with your supervisor any ideas you have for the future, discuss your career plans, any conferences that you think you'd like to go to, internships and so on. I mean, partly, your supervisor is going to be a very, very relevant source of references, recommendations, and so on. So it's a very good idea to keep that regular communication. Many students go away from Oxford for considerable periods for fieldwork. If that is the case, then I strongly recommend that you maintain the communication by email, possible in most parts. And it's a really good idea to keep up that communication. Think about some practicalities. Firstly, how do you address your supervisor? Maybe professor, maybe doctor, maybe first name, but somehow you've got to sort it out. And it may change. It may be professor somebody in the first term, and then gradually as you get to know each other better. Good idea to sort that out. And again, there are cultural differences. I have 2 students who I've worked with for 4 years. They've completed, and they've never called me Ingrid. Even though I sign every email with Ingrid, they are always culturally Professor Lunt students. So just work that out. And it doesn't matter. Just work out what's comfortable. It's always useful to have a record of meetings. Every single meeting. Who keeps these? I recommend that the student keeps the record. What I do with my own students is ask them to email me straight after the meeting a short note of what we discussed, what we agreed, who's doing what, and the date of the next meeting. That record can be very brief, bullet points, but it's extremely important. It's very important, I think, for the process of supervision, but it's also extremely important, for example, if in the unlikely event that something went wrong and you needed to go back over the record to see what actually happened. I think it's usually helpful to arrange the next meeting at the end of one supervision. So at the end of the supervision, okay, when are we next going to meet? Fortnight's time. Because it's much easier to cancel that meeting than to pull it together at short notice. And also, it gives a sort of purpose and a direction and a progress in the process of supervision. It's an excellent idea if you come to the meeting with an agenda. It's your meeting, it's your precious time, it's also the supervisor's precious time, but it's your meeting and it's your time. And it helps to ensure that you get what you want and what you need from that supervision. So I think an agenda, just a list of points that you want to discuss, so that you make sure that both that you've prepared for the meeting and that you make sure that you cover in the meeting everything that you hoped for. Because that is particularly important, but not only important, it's particularly important if you have long gaps between meetings. You really need to make sure that you make maximum use of that precious hour, or whatever it is. If your supervisor needs you to confirm the meeting, make sure you know how to do that. But particularly, try to avoid cancelling at last minute. I mean, obviously things happen, and have a clear cancellation arrangement. As I've said already, try to build in the review of your supervision alongside your termly review of progress. And keep in mind your 2, 3, 4-year plan and the relevant milestones. So those are some of the practical aspects. I should say that some universities make these supervision records mandatory, and they require formal records. We don't here. We don't do a lot of formal mandatory procedures in relation to supervision. Some of you may find it helpful to do that. Again, it's a matter of preference and what suits you and your supervisor best. But I do recommend strongly record keeping and agenda setting.